I checked the mirror because I thought someone was tailgating me. There were no headlights behind me, but there was someone sitting in my backseat, and when I turned around, it was empty. Hello, little ravens. Tonight, another account has been added to the archive. These are documented first-person testimonies from those who encountered something they still can't explain. If you're drawn to realistic horror, subscribe and listen carefully. Tonight's archive contains 4 accounts from drivers who saw something in the mirror that should not have been there. I take the same route home every night. I leave the warehouse at 11:40 p.m., merge onto the interstate, drive 12 miles north, then exit onto a 2-lane stretch that cuts through farmland before reaching my neighborhood. I've done it so many times I don't need GPS. Most nights, I barely remember the drive. It was a Tuesday when this happened. Nothing unusual about the shift. Nothing unusual about the weather. Dry road, clear sky, no fog, no rain. Traffic was light. By the time I reached the 2-lane road, there wasn't another car in sight. That stretch is the quietest part of the drive. No streetlights, just open fields on both sides and the occasional fence post catching the edge of your headlights. At night, it feels like you're moving through a tunnel of darkness. About a mile in, I checked my rearview mirror out of habit. Empty road behind me. I looked back to the windshield. Then I glanced up again. That's when I noticed something shift in the reflection. It wasn't outside the car. It was inside. For just a fraction of a second, it looked like someone leaning forward from the middle of the back seat. Not fully upright. More like the posture you'd take if you were about to say something to the driver. I froze. My first thought wasn't fear. It was confusion. I live alone. No one had been in my car. I hadn't given anyone a ride in weeks. I told myself it had to be the headrest, the way the darkness breaks around shapes. Maybe the reflection of my own shoulder distorted by the angle. I kept driving. I didn't turn around. Instead, I adjusted the mirror slightly. Just a small tilt. The back seat was empty. I felt stupid for reacting at all. The mind fills in blanks when it's tired. I'd worked a double shift the day before. That was enough explanation for me. Another half-mile passed. I was more aware now, listening harder, watching the edges of the road like something might dart out. Then I checked the mirror again, and I saw it more clearly. Someone was sitting directly behind me, centered, close enough that I should have felt their presence. The shape wasn't detailed, no clear face, just the outline of a head and shoulders, darker than the rest of the interior, too solid to be shadow, too symmetrical to be a trick of light. My grip tightened on the wheel. This time I did turn around, fast. The back seat was empty. No one, the upholstery smooth and undisturbed. I even twisted further, checking the floor behind the passenger seat. Nothing. I faced forward again, heart pounding now, and told myself it was adrenaline. Once your brain commits to an idea, it reinforces it. I wasn't going to look again. I lasted maybe 10 seconds. When I checked the mirror a third time, the figure wasn't leaning forward anymore. It was sitting back, as if it had settled in. I remember the exact feeling in my chest. Not panic. Not yet. It was the realization that whatever I was seeing in the mirror was not reacting to me. When I turned around before, it hadn't disappeared in response. It had simply not been there. The mirror and the car interior were showing me 2 different versions of the same space. I tested it. Slowly this time. Eyes on the mirror. The shape was there. I began turning my head, keeping the reflection in my peripheral vision as long as possible. The second the mirror left my direct line of sight, the back seat was empty. I snapped my eyes back to the mirror. Still there. That was when fear finally set in. Not because someone was in my car, But because something only existed in the reflection, the rest of the drive felt longer than usual. Every few seconds, I checked again. It never moved, never leaned closer, never raised a hand. It just sat there, quiet. When I reached my driveway, I didn't pull in right away. I stopped at the curb and stared into the mirror one last time. The figure was still seated behind me, centered, waiting. I turned the car off. The interior lights came on automatically. I didn't turn around immediately. I looked at the mirror. The back seat was empty, completely empty. I slowly twisted in my seat. Nothing there. No indentation in the fabric. No sound of movement. I got out of the car and opened the rear door anyway. The seat was cold. That was 3 weeks ago. I still drive that same road. But now I've adjusted the mirror upward, just enough that I can't see the back seat anymore. I tell myself it's because the headlights from other cars were distracting. But the truth is, I don't want to know if it's still sitting there. Some reflections are just light and glass. Others behave like windows, and the unsettling part isn't what you see. It's the possibility that something can see you back, from a place that only exists in reverse. If this account unsettled you, leave a like. It helps this archive reach others who listen after dark. And tell me, would you keep looking in the mirror? Go for next story. I've been driving long distances for almost 9 years. Not a trucker, not professionally. I work in medical equipment sales, which means a lot of rural hospitals, a lot of back roads, and a lot of late returns home when meetings run long. The night this happened, I was driving through western Kansas. Flat land, straight roads. Nothing but darkness stretching past the edge of your headlights. It was around 1:15 a.m. I hadn't passed another car in at least 20 minutes. That kind of silence changes the way you think. The road stops feeling public. It starts feeling private, like it belongs to you. I remember adjusting the radio because the static between stations felt louder than usual. That's when I noticed headlights behind me. Far back. Too far to tell what kind of car. They weren't gaining on me. Just there. I checked the speedometer. I was doing about 5 over the limit. Steady. The headlights kept their distance. No drifting, no weaving. After a few minutes, I stopped thinking about them. Then I checked the mirror again. The headlights were gone. Not turned off. Not fading. Just gone. The road behind me was completely empty. That unsettled me more than if they passed. There hadn't been any side roads for miles. No visible driveways. Just flat fields. I scanned the darkness behind me, expecting to see the faint glow of lights turning off somewhere in the distance. Nothing. I told myself they must have slowed down. Maybe I hadn't noticed a turnoff. I faced forward again. 10 seconds later, I looked back at the mirror. Someone was standing in the road behind my car, centered in my lane, far enough that I couldn't make out details, but close enough that I should have seen them earlier. I felt a jolt of disbelief more than fear. There was no way someone could just appear on an open highway like that. The road was straight for miles. If they had been walking, I would have seen them in my headlights long before passing. I blinked hard, still there. A dark figure, arms at their sides, not waving, not trying to flag me down, just standing. I checked my side mirrors. Empty. I glanced through the back window. Nothing. No one. I looked back at the rearview mirror. The figure was still in the reflection, exactly where it had been. That was when my chest tightened. The mirror was showing something that wasn't physically behind me. I eased my foot off the gas. The figure did not get closer. It did not get smaller. It remained the same distance, as if fixed in place within the reflection itself. I pressed the brakes gently. My car slowed. The fields outside my windshield drifted by more slowly. In the mirror, The figure remained at the exact same relative distance. That's when I understood something was wrong in a way I couldn't explain. If it were a real person, my speed change would have affected the distance between us. But the reflection wasn't responding to physics. I pulled over. Gravel crunched under my tires as I eased onto the shoulder. I stared into the mirror. The figure was still there, centered, motionless. I told myself I needed to confront it logically. I opened the door and stepped out. The cold hit immediately. Open land wind, sharp and dry. I walked around to the back of my car. The road behind me was empty for as far as I could see. No person, no headlights, no movement in the fields. Just wind bending grass under a pale moon. I stood there for a full minute, listening. Nothing. I got back into the driver's seat, closed the door, looked up at the mirror. The figure was still there, exactly where it had been. Same posture, same distance. I didn't feel panic then. I felt watched, not from behind me, from inside the frame of the mirror itself. I reached up and adjusted it, tilted it downward. The reflection shifted to show more of my back seat. Empty. I tilted it upward again. The figure returned. I repeated it twice. Down, nothing. Up, standing in the road. It was like the mirror had 2 layers of reality, depending on angle. My hands were shaking now. I didn't want to drive forward, because I didn't know if the figure would remain behind me, or if it would eventually appear closer. I merged back onto the road, drove faster this time, 80 miles per hour. The landscape blurred. The figure in the mirror did not change. Same distance, same stillness. For nearly 10 minutes, I drove like that, too afraid to slow down, too afraid to look away. And then, without transition, it was gone. No fade, no movement, just empty road behind me. I kept driving for another 30 miles before pulling into a gas station near the interstate. Bright fluorescent lights, security cameras, other cars. I checked the mirror one last time before stepping out. Nothing but pavement and the glow of the station behind me. That was 8 months ago. I still drive that route occasionally. I still check the mirror more often than I used to. And sometimes, on long, straight roads, when there's absolutely nothing behind me, I hesitate before looking, because part of me is afraid the road won't be empty anymore. Not physically, but in reflection. Highways are built on distance and momentum. They obey speed, direction, cause and effect. But when something in the mirror refuses to follow those rules, you're no longer dealing with distance. You're dealing with something fixed, waiting at the exact point where reality begins to bend. I drive a small refrigerated van for a regional grocery supplier. Most of my routes start before sunrise, but once a week I cover an overnight shift delivering to stores that restock at 3 or 4 a.m. Those are the quiet runs. Less traffic, fewer lights, long stretches of state highways where the only sound is the hum of the tires and the low vibration from the cooling unit behind me. The first time I noticed it, I thought it was just fatigue. It was around 2:30 in the morning. I'd been driving for about an hour when I checked the rearview mirror out of habit. A car was behind me. Nothing unusual. Just a pair of headlights, steady, centered in the lane. I didn't think much of it. But a few minutes later, something about the lights felt off. They weren't shifting with the road. The highway curved slightly in certain sections, enough that headlights usually drift left and right in the mirror as vehicles adjust. These didn't. They stayed perfectly aligned, perfectly centered. I changed lanes. The headlights stayed centered. That's when I realized something strange. The road behind me was empty. I could see it clearly through the back window of the van. No car, no glow of lights, just darkness. I looked back at the mirror. The headlights were still there, close enough now that I should have seen the shape of the vehicle. But there was nothing behind me in real space. I felt a ripple of unease move through me. I told myself it had to be reflection, maybe the cooling unit lights bouncing off the glass. So I leaned slightly to the side, changing my viewing angle. Through the back window, empty highway, mirror, headlights. I reached up and adjusted the mirror downward. The lights disappeared. I adjusted it back up. They returned, same distance, same brightness. No flicker, no beam spread, no glare entering the cabin. Just two fixed points of white light suspended in darkness. I slowed down gradually, from 65 to 50. If there had been a real car, it would have closed the gap. The headlights in the mirror did not move. They remained exactly where they had been, as if they weren't part of the road at all. I considered pulling over, but something stopped me. Not fear of a person, fear of confirming something I couldn't explain. So I did something else. I turned off my own headlights. Just for a second. The world outside my windshield vanished into black. But in the mirror, the headlights remained. Bright, clear, unaffected. I turned my lights back on immediately. My hands were shaking now. Because if those lights weren't reflections, and they weren't another vehicle, then they weren't dependent on my car being visible either. They were independent, following something else, or maybe not following at all. The rest of the drive, I kept the mirror angled slightly down so I couldn't see them. I told myself I'd imagined it. Until the next week. Same route, same time, empty road. And when I checked the mirror, they were already there. Not approaching, not arriving, just present, waiting in their reflection before I even noticed them. I don't cover overnight shifts anymore. I traded with another driver. He asked me why. I told him I needed more sleep. But the real reason is simple. I don't want to find out what happens if those lights ever get closer. Or worse, if they finally appear in the road behind me. Sometimes it isn't a figure you see. Sometimes it's only light. But light is supposed to come from somewhere. And when it doesn't, you have to ask yourself, what exactly is following you? This happened during a snowstorm in late January of 2019. I live about 40 minutes outside the city, far enough that streetlights disappear once you pass the last strip mall. The road home narrows into a 2-lane highway surrounded by woods and open fields. That night, snow was falling steadily. Not heavy enough to close the roads, but thick enough to soften everything. Sound felt muted. Even the engine seemed quieter. I left work later than usual, close to midnight. The windshield wipers moved in a steady rhythm, brushing away flakes that instantly tried to reclaim the glass. Visibility wasn't terrible, but it wasn't comfortable either. Snow changes depth perception. It compresses distance, makes everything look closer than it is. I was about 15 minutes from home when I checked the rearview mirror. I wasn't expecting to see anything. There hadn't been another car behind me for miles, but someone was sitting in my backseat. Not a shadow, not a vague outline. A person, clear enough that I could see the shape of their shoulders, the dark collar of what looked like a coat. They were sitting upright in the center seat, facing forward. I felt my stomach drop so fast I nearly swerved. I twisted around immediately. The back seat was empty. Blanket tossed in the corner. Nothing else. I turned back toward the windshield, pulse racing. It's the snow, I said out loud. It's the glare. Snow can reflect light in strange ways. Combine that with interior shadows, and your brain fills in the rest. I focused on the road, counted my breathing. 5 seconds later, I looked at the mirror again. He was still there. Same posture. Same stillness, watching the road ahead through my windshield. Not looking at me, not moving, just present. This time I didn't turn around right away. I stared at the reflection, trying to understand what I was seeing. The strangest part wasn't the figure itself. It was the background. In the mirror, the snow behind my car looked different, darker, thicker, as if the storm were heavier in the reflected world. Through my windshield, I could see the road clearly enough. But in the mirror, it looked like I was driving into something deeper, quieter. I swallowed and turned my head slowly. Empty back seat. I reached behind me, hand shaking, and touched the upholstery. Cold fabric, no warmth, no presence. When I faced forward again, I hesitated before looking up. I didn't want confirmation, but I looked. He hadn't moved. I tried to study his face, but the reflection wouldn't give me details. It was as if his features were just out of focus. Every time I thought I saw eyes, they blurred. I tested something. I slowed the car. The trees outside drifted by more slowly. In the mirror, the snow continued falling at the same pace. Unchanged. I sped up. No difference. The reflection wasn't responding to my speed. It wasn't sensed to my movement. It was like the mirror was showing me a different stretch of road entirely. One where he had already been sitting there for a long time. A thought crept into my mind that I couldn't shake. What if he wasn't in my back seat? What if I was in his? The idea made my skin prickle. I drove the remaining miles without taking my eyes off the road. But every few seconds, my gaze drifted upward. Still there, silent. When I turned onto my street, the familiar houses looked wrong, dimmer than usual. Snow piled softly along the sidewalks. I pulled into my driveway, put the car in park, and didn't turn it off. I was afraid of what might change when the engine stopped. After nearly a minute, I forced myself to look at the mirror again. He was still there, centered, as if waiting for me to do something. I shut off the engine. The interior lights came on automatically. Warm yellow glow filled the cabin. I looked up. The mirror reflected nothing but my own empty back seat and falling snow behind the car. I turned around slowly, empty. I stepped out into the cold air, snow crunching under my boots, and opened the rear door. Nothing inside. Just the blanket. I locked the car and went inside. I didn't look back. Since then, I've avoided driving at night when it's snowing. But sometimes, even on clear evenings, I catch myself hesitating before checking the mirror. Because part of me wonders, if I look long enough, will I eventually see him again? And if I do, will he still be facing forward? Or will he finally be looking at me? Snow softens the world. It blurs edges, erases tracks. But mirrors don't soften anything. They preserve what's there. And sometimes, they preserve what hasn't happened yet. 4 roads, 4 drivers, no witnesses, just mirrors. Most people think fear lives in what's ahead of them, in dark highways, empty forests, unfamiliar turns. But tonight, every story shared the same detail. No one was chased. No one was attacked. No one ever confirmed what they saw. Because sometimes the most unsettling encounters don't happen in front of you. They stay behind you, just out of reach. If you've ever driven alone at night and felt something you couldn't explain, you're not alone. And if you've ever checked your mirror twice, just to be sure, there's usually a reason. Subscribe if you're drawn to documented first-person accounts like these. On the final screen, there are 2 more story files waiting for you to continue your marathon into the unknown. And before you leave, take one last look behind you, just in case.